All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Landscape Photography. We're all super excited for tonight's show. We are joined here by Alex Noriega, brilliant photographer from over in the west of the USA. And I'm also, naturally joined here by Luke and Paul. Alex is a brilliant shooter, has been a big inspiration of mine for many years since I first kind of started out. And he's got a very sort of clean and minimalist, and focusing right in on the key part of the photo. Is really good at honing in on those subjects and not over cluttering. So we've decided to kind of delve into the art of simplicity that Alex really exemplifies in his work, and many of the other things that go on in his photography life, and just see where the conversation goes. So we're really stoked, and I know Luke and Paul are too.
Yeah,
Um,
Thanks for
Alex.
having me.
I've tried Alex a while ago, but Alex has had a very different lifestyle from a lot of people we know and a lot of photographers, which we'll get into tonight.
yeah,
To me, Alex is right at the beating heart of a lot of the US community, and he has a lot of amazing connections with a lot of the most talented people over there, and does a lot of wonderful collaborative work and workshops and different things with them as well. And we've had a number of his colleagues and friends on the show, and Alex has been the mystery man on the end of the road that is hardly ever in a position, or has been for years, to actually be easily connectable with internet and fancy microphones. And we've managed to somehow get him on the spot this time, so we're all pretty stoked.
Very
Well, I'm
much.
not all that mysterious, but happy to be here.
Absolutely. And
um,
I guess maybe we can just start with you telling us a bit about yourself and I guess how you found yourself into being a photographer.
Yeah, what was that? 13 years ago now. I was doing information technology, computers. I was working for myself. I had quit a job at Circuit City, which was, Best Buy. You have that over there?
I know,
No, it's all
I've
US.
spent a lot of time in the
Big
States.
Yeah,
computer store,
electronics,
isn't it?
big box
Yeah.
electronics store, and
Yeah.
I went on my own and started doing computer work for a bunch of clients, and self-employed for a couple of years, and ended up with a bunch of spare computer parts, and I had to sell them on eBay. And so I had to buy a camera because at the time in 2009, 2010, cell phone cameras weren't a thing really. My
mm,
BlackBerry had a terrible camera. I had to buy a camera to take pictures of these parts to sell them on eBay. And I, as soon as I started, like, it had all the manual controls. It was a point and shoot, but you could set the three parts of exposure. And um, I was just enraptured by, like, just setting these little processors on my table and like lighting them from the side and getting the focus just right and doing a long exposure because my room was dark. I was like amazed at how clean they came out, and I just liked the process of photography to start out. So
yeah,
it
well,
just snowballed from there, especially because I was self-employed, and so I had all the time in the world to dive in,
mm,
just think about it nonstop.
yeah, well, that's going to be one of the most unique, like, getting into photography stories I've heard. That's
Yeah, I didn't see that coming, Ra. That's a good one.
Well, especially for nature photography, because I feel like most nature photographers started out being nature enthusiasts, and then they just started bringing a camera with them.
mm,
And it was kind of the other way around for me, is that photography is what got me out in nature. And like, I didn't really appreciate I mean, I went outside, but I wasn't obsessed with the landscape or anything before photography.
yeah,
And I
well,
started out with architecture and portraits. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but then I took this road trip across the country, and the US is vast. And especially in the West, there's just insane landscapes, the mountains and deserts. And I saw all of that on this road trip with my friends, and just became obsessed with
mm,
photographing that, and just left architecture, portraits, everything else behind. I actually moved out west within like 2 months of that road trip and just dove in head first.
yeah,
Where'd
well,
you move from, Alex?
What's that?
Where'd you move from?
The Midwest of the US, so Wisconsin,
mm,
and out to California.
yeah, well. Um, yeah, so like, so obviously that's drawn you to the landscape. Has there been And obviously, your work is very kind of drawn to the Southwest now. Would you say that that focus on the Southwest is because of that initial impression from the Southwest on that road trip?
I mean, it definitely, I still feel things going to the same places that I saw that first time.
Yeah.
Um, but I was equally into mountains then. And just anything I could get my hands on that was new and fresh. But I think the thing that keeps me coming back to the desert is um, just the expansiveness of it. Like if you're in a forest, you can only see, 30 feet in front of you. And I just love seeing the lay of the land, and it's always so vast and relatively sparse, but the life that is there, like all the trees, I shoot a lot of trees in the desert, is really full of character because it has to struggle to survive with so little water and just like a rougher existence for all life. Um it's not, like there's biomass every square inch. It's like when it's there, it's special and it kind of stands on its own. And like in a forest, I would struggle to find a single tree to shoot because they all kind of look the same to me. I just feel like things in the desert have so much character, and the landscape itself, it's like millions of years of geology spread out before you. So that's what keeps me coming back.
Would you say it's easier to get around in the desert too, in terms of, there's less
Oh,
obstructions? Or yeah.
yeah. And like just see a place and think I want to go there, and then start looking at the map. And there's probably some old track out there because the US has this history of mining in the West. There's so many roads that go to places that you'd have no business being as a human being. Like, why is there a road out here? It's because there was a mine out there. And luckily now we can, like, you get a 4-wheel drive vehicle and you can go almost anywhere. You don't have to even hike necessarily to go to like some really remote places, really rugged places.
And how does that work in terms of access? Is it controlled by the government, or like it's sort of open range?
That's the other thing about the Western US as opposed to the Eastern half, is that it's almost all public land. So as a US citizen, you have a right to be on any of that land. You can camp on it. You can do whatever you want, essentially, as long as you're not harming it. But even there are some types of land like US Forest Service land where you can harvest, cut down trees and harvest shit from the land. But yeah, it's pretty much free use. Like out in the West, there's national parks which are very well protected, and they're like the most spectacular places. But there's so many other places that are just totally under the radar, all under the Bureau of Land Management. You can just drive out there, do whatever the hell you want. There's no supervision. There's nothing. You're just out there.
Wild West.
Yeah.
Got to watch out for Mormon preachers, man. There's heaps of them out there.
In Utah, yeah.
Come across. So a lot of Mormon preachers in the most random places in the Southwest, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. As an atheist, I don't, I don't, I don't know. I don't fit in with them, but they're very nice. They're very nice people. They always try to sell religion on me. And
yeah,
like, no, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to put them in good use when I come across them. It's like while they're chatting away, it's like, oh, do you want to take a photo while I'm hanging out on this rock ledge or doing this? Because I'm not going to get one myself. Some of my best location shots I've ever got have been from Mormon preachers, man. Like,
oh yeah, they probably know the spots. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just give them a camera and say, hey, while you're talking to me, do you want to just take a couple of shots while I'm doing this? Yeah, thanks, mate. But so Alex, you've seen probably arguably a lot of the US for someone your age, and we'll get into why and how. And I think you've partly answered the question already as to why you've chosen where you are now. So my understanding is after having a lot of fluid time in terms of home space and where you live, you've settled now in the Southwest, in Utah, I believe.
Yeah.
What's I don't know where we want to start on that timeline of that transition point, but it's I think it's going to be a pretty interesting part of the conversation is from going from just going on the road trip, just your soul just singing out into the landscape and being drawn into it, and then where did you go from there to end up living in a very transitory lifestyle for the most of the last 3.5 years?
Oh, sure. Well, I guess starting back where I left you off, a couple of months after I took that road trip out west, I had to move out west, California. But Los Angeles, terrible place to move if you're actually interested in the landscape. I left there in like 6 months, moved up to Oregon, which is very wet and lots of trees and green and mountains. And actually, it was like, I think it was Mark Adamus and Floris Van Brugel and maybe Ryan Dyer. Those are the people that I saw their photos of the Northwest. I'm like, I'm going to move there. And I just had the ability to do that because I was self-employed. I did all my work remotely for clients. So just picked up and moved. And then I spent a few years basically chasing other people's work, trying to just copy them, do my own version of their stuff up there. And then I started making trips back down to the Southwest, and I remembered how much I had loved that on the road trip and started kind of finding my own style down there. So over that was that 2010 to 2019, like I lived in the Northwest, and then I started making all these trips to the Southwest, like 15-hour drive, and I'd go down there for like a month and live out of my truck. And I'm like, why am I even paying rent in the Northwest in Oregon when I just want to be down here? And then I met my girlfriend, and she's a nature enthusiast. Now she's into photography. She's actually really good. She's going to make me look terrible someday. But yeah, I met her. She was into the same sort of thing, the exploration. I was just like, do you want to just go be there all the time instead of taking these road trips? And so she said yes, and we bought a trailer and hit the road, and like sold almost everything I owned except what fit in a little storage unit. And for the last 3.5 years, we were on the road. We had a travel trailer and a truck that we towed it with, and lived around all these national parks and all this this public land, this BLM land, like just camping all around the Western U.S. for the most part. We call it camping, but it was pretty comfortable in there.
Was it what sort of style of trailer was it? Was it like RV built in, or was it tow behind? What sort of
tow behind? Yeah. So we had a truck and we towed it behind, and the advantage of that was you could leave it somewhere and then go off-roading in the truck. Although you have to have a truck that's not that great at off-roading if it's going to be good at towing. A bigger one, stiffer suspension and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we spent the last 3.5 years on the road because I had been taking such long road trips. So I was just like, why do I even need a house? And now I've come around to the idea of having a home base and kind of having some balance, because it has its own challenges to be out there all the time. You'd think it's a dream for a landscape photographer, but actually don't think it's that great for me.
Yeah, I subscribe to your mailing list, and which I very recommend to everyone to sign up to. And you put it really well, I think, and just in terms of describing, maybe you could describe to us, similar to how you did in the list, about the challenges that you faced while you're in that sort of lifestyle, and how that can be a challenge for being a photographer.
Well, it's stressful because you're always moving. And like, even if you're on that public land where you can essentially do whatever you want, if there is a ranger posted in the area, he'll tell you to move your house every 2 weeks. So you have to move like to a completely different section of the land. So at most you can spend 2 weeks somewhere. Maybe like in a national park like Death Valley, there's a 30-day stay limit, although I've definitely done longer than that. But you just always have to move. You always have to pick up everything. And then couple that with the fact that everything's always breaking on a trailer and you're towing it, especially off-road, and your vehicle's always breaking because you're stressing it so much, just towing 6,000 pounds all around the country. And those 2 weeks, you don't really have a lot of time to relax. And then like you have to drive an hour to go to the grocery store, and you have to plan out, a week of food at a time and try to cram it all in this small refrigerator. Like everything ends up requiring so much planning and so much like you're just moving all the time. Like, oh, we're going to spend an entire day doing laundry and getting groceries because we have to drive to this town an hour and a half away to do it. And we have to plan that. And like, it's just, you don't end up with all that much time. And then when you do have the time, this is another problem for me, is that it kind of killed my motivation, because I was always in these places and it didn't really feel like I was on an adventure anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, that's out my window. Got mountains right out there. But like, why would I feel the urge to go out and shoot right now when I'm going to be there for 2 weeks or a month or whatever? Like, oh, I'll just go tomorrow. And
the novelty,
as a procrastinator, it's kind of difficult. Like, I love photography, but I mean, I can't do it every day forever. Can't do it 365 days a year. So then I didn't actually shoot all that much a lot of the time. I went in these long periods. So there are all sorts of reasons, but mostly the stress of always moving. And then just always feeling like a visitor, like never having your own place, even on public land where you're allowed to be. It's like someone's going to tell you to move, or someone's going to come park next to you and be an asshole. And like, I wanted my own place again.
Yeah. So yeah, I
So
imagine that sort of novelty factor would be a big part in inspiration. Hey, because like if you've made that big trip out, you'd be a lot more motivated to come away with something, I suppose.
Yeah, I think
like
taking away some comfort actually puts you more in the adventuring mode. Like the fact that I'm in my pajamas and I have my computer there and our little Wi-Fi hotspot, and I can turn on the heater. It's like it's comfortable in here, and it's not comfortable out there. Like if you're camping, it's like, well, it's better to be out there than in a tent or in the back of the truck. So
exactly.
So Alex, for those romantics, and there's some, including me, do you want to speak about the good stuff as well?
Yeah. Well, it was awesome.
What's amazing about it, or the kind of I mean, you must have incredible life.
This is all just why I moved into a house now. That's why I quit. But also, it was great because I mean, I went to a lot of places that I never would have gone otherwise. Especially because my girlfriend always had some idea of where we should go and try and see, like the East Coast of the US. I would never consider going out there on my own because it's so crowded. There's just so many more people. But we went out there and that was really cool. We went to the swamps. I got some really cool shots there in the Southeast. Like just the ability to be in a place for an extended period, I guess, is probably, it was a weakness for me, but it's also a strength, because you can react to conditions. Like if you take a trip somewhere, you're just at the mercy of whatever happens in those few days. But when we were there for 2 weeks, we could say, well, today it's not so great, but there should be a storm coming in a few days, and then we can get that clearing light. Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think I saw like Death Valley. Just in Death Valley, like when windstorms came through, I got so many in 2022 because we were there for like a month and a half. Got like 5 different windy days on the dunes, and that's usually a pretty rare thing. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well, on that topic, yeah, those I think your collection that you put out of those dunes, I think a lot of them were those beautiful windy conditions, and just so many incredible atmospheric glowy sort of images of those real nice simplified just very graphic sort of style photos, which I think.
Should we have a look at some of those, Alex?
Yeah,
sure. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, I can see you.
While we're talking about it, and while you're bringing that up, I was interested too, because your work generally is, I guess, more on the intimate side or the smaller scene side of things. And as a more of a grand landscape shooter, I suppose myself, what do you enjoy about the intimate scenes? And is that just where you find the images that's what's speaking to you?
You're opening up a can of worms there. I mean, I could speak on that for a while.
Well, yeah,
before
and also,
I forget why I pulled this up.
That process of transition, because not many people start shooting intimate scenes. They generally move into grand first, and then slowly wander their way into the intimate sort of realm. I don't know what your journey's been like, Alex, but it's a very standout feature of the style of your work.
Very much that has been my journey. Like if you go, I have my website organized by year. Actually, partly because I don't want to have to categorize every image, and there's blurred lines between different categories, and it just becomes a nightmare to organize. But also because I like to see progression. So like if you go back to my oldest gallery, these are almost all grand scenes, right? Like lots of skies, and actually you can see some intimates in there, but definitely like I'm not shooting anything like this nowadays. And nowadays there's almost no skies. Like it's almost all trees or tight shots of dunes. Before I forget, like these sort of conditions are pretty rare, not like this too. And just being in Death Valley for so long was why I was able to get so many of these shots that year. So that is a benefit. I don't want to be all negative about road life. It's really nice to be in a place for an extended period and get to know it, number one, so you know where to go when something like that happens, and number two, being able to be there when it happens. Like,
you find, because I understand in Death Valley that a lot of the dunes are actually rather permanent. Is that true? Did you find yourself kind of returning to certain shapes and areas for certain compositions?
I'd recognize them. Like, this seems vaguely familiar. They shift a little bit year to year, but actually, yeah, not that much. You would think that they're constantly moving, but I've found compositions from years prior,
Mm.
like just slightly different. Like the crests of the dunes will look different because people walked on them and then the wind reshaped it a little bit, but the main shapes are all still there.
Yeah.
What's the physicality like in those sort of conditions? I mean, are you trying to like protect your camera gear from getting destroyed? You can only
No, the
shoot
camera gear, I
away from the
mean,
wind, or
that's why I'm spending so much money on, or why we all do, I would think. Like, the only difference between a consumer lens these days and a pro one is the weather sealing. Like, they're all sharp, right?
Mm.
So I am buying it for the weather sealing and for the fact that it's rugged. And then when I'm in conditions like this, I can just ignore the gear and just focus on the photography.
Just a tool. Yeah.
It's a tool. Yeah, I don't baby it. I do put the lens hood on so that you're not having sand just scouring the front element. But other than that, I didn't do anything to protect any of my gear because it's all like pro sealed stuff, you know.
Protecting your eyes, though, I imagine. Do you
That's
got
the hardest
goggles?
part. Yeah, that's the worst part of the
Yeah.
sand is
so
you
it's saying,
can't.
can you only really shoot kind of side on or away from the wind because it's just too hard otherwise? Or
Yeah, well, you wear goggles if you really want
All
to
right.
be able to keep your eyes open,
oh wow,
because otherwise, yeah, you're just like
Mad
squinting. You
Max.
can't have them open. Um, but then the goggles get all scoured and they get like scratched up to the point where you can't see, and you're just like, screw it, and you throw the goggles off, and then just like kind of peer into the viewfinder with like one eye squinted and just barely be able to see. Maybe that's why the shots are so simple, is because I could only see the bigger forms. I couldn't see any details.
The fact that you're, yeah, composing images like this with conditions like that is a, yeah, real testament to the work. Um,
What I
and
find interesting is that it's so much more calming than the real experience. This was like violent wind, and that's why it's so simple looking in the
yeah.
camera.
Yeah, it's a bit of a juxtaposition of
Mm.
sort of a paradox here, isn't it? The aesthetic elements of what you're creating require the violence of the conditions.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, because otherwise you have a lot in the background that distracts from. Let's see if I can find an older one. Well, I do a pretty good job of excluding that stuff, but like if anyone saw any of my old tutorials on this one, I had to remove this road in the background that's going up a mountain behind here because there's just a bunch of junk in the background.
Mm.
But also a lot of the times the things that you'll think were skies are actually like, this is not sky, this is just a mountain back there, and then there's all the sand. Like, even if there isn't sand, you'll still get a nice blue mountain backdrop behind the dunes.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the one of the better times to be there is when the light's pretty low, like the magic hours.
Yeah, yeah, because you get like individual dunes doing something with the light.
Mm.
And the one that's my background here is like the last second of light.
Yeah.
But some dune fields there are mountains surrounding them. Like, actually most of these were taken on that field.
Mm.
So the sun doesn't ever get that low, at least in the evening.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
because the sun's blocked by the mountains.
yeah, like an hour before actual sunset, you'll lose your direct light. But then there's some dune fields where you'll get like it's completely open to the west and you'll get that last second of light, like this one behind me. And so it's really a different quality to the light than, say, this.
Yeah. Would you say, well, I've seen some, yeah, really amazing examples of what the dunes do reflecting ambient light at different stages of that sunset, whether it be the golden light
Yeah.
hitting it, those purple hues, those
Blue.
pale blue, white sort of hues. I've seen work from both yourself and TJ Thorne, who, yeah, have kind of showed that progression. And yeah, would you say you have a sort of personal, I know, leaning towards any certain stage of that, or you love it all?
Well, this is awesome. Like the pink or purple glow, depending on this day was weirdly purple, and it was just because there was a lot of sand lingering in the air that was diffusing it, and for some reason it ended up a lot more blue than pink, like kind of pushing it towards purple.
Mm.
Does that
But
happen well after sunset? So you're getting like that post
yeah,
flight. Yeah.
yeah, this is like half hour after sunset sort of
Mm.
glow, but it's like it's because the sun's coming through so much atmosphere by that point, and the dunes are so reflective and they pick up like even the subtlest light. You get this kind of like salmon colored glow.
Mm.
Like
We're
Alex,
super
getting
what,
some
bright.
what kind
incredible
of
sunsets here after a volcanic ash cloud came through from Tonga, and we got very similar, like really purpley pink sunsets for a
Yeah.
while. And there, that
Yeah, like a solid
particular,
6 months or so. Yeah, it was wild.
yeah,
Yeah, it is
what
crazy
sort of
light to see, surreal. But it's the magic is because the dunes are so reflective, they're so bright. Like if you have a dark subject, you can't really see it.
Mm.
what sort of focal lengths are you shooting with here, Alex?
Well, these are
Yeah,
probably all on a 70 to 300,
73.
probably towards the long end. The new ones were all 100 to 500, and actually, you would think it would be like on the wider end, right? Because we have like some foreground layers, but this one was 500 millimeters,
wow,
which gives you an idea of how vast the dunes are.
Mm.
Even the small field like this, I mean, it's only a couple miles by a couple miles, few square miles, but
Find
it's
yourself,
enough to.
sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, do you find yourself sort of focus stacking these sort of scenes? Because telephoto, yeah, they can really be deceptive with how much depth of field is present.
No,
No?
I know people do, but yeah, this is one shot, and
Mm.
the background isn't purpose. Like if you look at that very back dune there, well, the wind's blowing, number one, so it's not super sharp back there anyway, but it's probably not in focus. I don't care though. All of this is.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any, like, sort of when you're in more the 100 mil sort of focal range, is there any sort of greater depth of field issues there, or can you generally capture that in one shot?
This I think is wider than 500. This is probably more like 1 to 200, and it's a good example of like how many different layers, how much depth you can get in one shot at f16. I think this background layer is out of focus, but again, I don't care because all of this is.
Yeah.
Kind of want to show that depth anyway to some degree. Having it a bit soft in the back can help.
A little bit, yeah. I think it just needs to not look sloppy. As long as it doesn't look sloppy, then you can. There's no rule that says anything has to be in focus.
Yeah.
Sloppy. That's an interesting descriptive word.
Yeah, well,
No, I've
like
never heard that to describe a photograph. That's a sloppy photograph. I was
I
like,
guess
oh.
it's more well executed is in terms of
yeah,
you
poorly executed is
considered.
the
Yeah.
meaning of sloppy there, not like messy, wet.
Well, to me, it speaks of yeah, focus and intent and using all the tools that at your disposal that you could do, which requires, a bit of intentionality and a bit of extra energy. That's what the opposite of sloppy feels like to me.
I think one of the I don't know if that image there from 2016 was that part of your portfolio that didn't you won the International Photographer of the Year at one point? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a square version of this that
Yeah.
was like I shot it slightly different for the square one. I think I just took a step to the right. Um, that one for international, and then a pano crop of this for the pano awards. I don't even shoot panos. I just found some images that cropped well 2x1.
I wonder how many of those images are true panos and the pano awards.
Well, apparently some of them because people were not happy that I won with crops, but I don't think it should matter how many frames you use. It's just a format. Like, did the composition work in 2x1 or not?
Yeah, exactly. Does it work?
I really love that really green shot there in the second with the flower in the middle. It's definitely one of my favorite images of yours, if not my most favorite. Did it take a while to track something down, track a little flower down like that, or is it just sort of?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this, Ted Gore, he doesn't really shoot anymore, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
guys
yeah,
probably know him.
definitely.
And TJ
Mm.
and us three, we went on a backpacking trip in the rainforest, and I think it was 3 days. And
Mm.
on the third day, on the way out, like an hour from the trailhead, or not even an hour, a mile from the trailhead, I saw this on the side of the trail, and they were ahead of me, and they just kept walking. And then I stopped for about an hour, just trying to find the symmetry, because like this shot's weird. If you flip it over, it doesn't look right. Like if you just rotate it. But something about this particular orientation, everything feels kind of symmetrical and it has a flow to it. And then finding the particular camera spot where that flower would be centered, because like you just move a little bit and it's off center. Nowadays it's kind of fallen out of favor for me because I feel like it's a little too on the nose. It's like, oh yeah, put it right in the center and everything's
Yeah.
perfectly symmetrical. It's like it's almost like there's no flow to it. But I'm still proud of the layout because I haven't seen a fern shot like this
Yeah,
ever.
I've seen a lot of folks do or try to emulate something like that, but
Like this, I'd probably shoot something more like this these
yeah,
days, like just a little less
A
on the
little more
nose, like
organic.
one thing in the center.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Alex, we started that conversation, and this is probably a good time to come back to it about that transition from grand to intimate. And
Yeah, I totally took us on a tangent there about
yeah,
this.
like that'd be
Right.
interesting maybe to follow on a little bit more, because that's obviously a huge part of where you're at now and your journey, and a little bit more about the how and why
Yeah.
you
Well,
made that
this
transition.
yeah, this year, 2016 that we were looking at was the first year that I was really doing intimate stuff that I felt like it was mine. And if you look the year before, it's still pretty much all grand stuff. Like, um, even when I was doing the dunes, even though this is an 85 millimeter shot, it's got like a nice curving foreground. It's pretty much a grand scene, right? It's epic. And um, like looking at this is probably my best grand landscape, but I don't feel like it's really mine. Like I feel like anyone that was there that morning could have come up with something similar. I found this particular spot with like the nice symmetry framing and the reflection there. Um, but and actually ever since this shot, because this one won USA Landscape Photographer of the Year, ever since this shot got popular, there's like a trail worn to my particular spot there. It was off trail and I was hopping across these little rocks to get there. And now people just walk straight through all the brush to get there. They've worn a little trail to go copy the shot. But I don't care anymore. Like it used to bother me, and now I don't care because that's exactly why I went away from this sort of thing. Is it's like I'm not really even that involved in the creation process. I'm just there, like getting lucky or not, or reaping the rewards of planning or not. But I don't feel like I feel like all the decisions on what to shoot here, like anyone else could arrive at them, and it's not really me. So those sorts of shots, like they don't really feel like I was enough of a participant in the composition process. Like maybe I found the nice layout of the foreground, but like anyone else could have seen it too. And then go to something like this and like I just feel like it's something that would be overlooked and it feels a lot more like mine because most people wouldn't see it. And it's not that like I have some great eye or something. It's just I'm not giving myself tunnel vision anymore, like for the big stuff. And instead, I'm willing to ignore this in order to look at my feet. And I think I come up with a lot of things that just by nature of being small or like quieter or more subtle or less obvious, like the photograph becomes more mine, like more uniquely mine. A good example might be like this one. Like I've never seen a shot like this because if you're in the slot canyon that I was in, you're probably trying to get both walls coming in, like sweeping in at an ultra wide angle, and like maybe get a bit of light coming through, like a little glow. I mean, spilling into the frame, but like I was willing to ignore all that because I was just drawn to this little detail. And so the photo is more me. And that's one of the reasons that I love intimate photos. It's like I feel like I find my own little thing that no one else will ever find. And if I take a big photo, someone can figure out where it is and go take the same one. And then it makes me feel like, why was I even there? Like I was just a camera operator. And that's not to say that like about everyone else's grand landscapes. That's how I feel about my own. And then I see other people's grand landscapes. I'm like, that's awesome. I should shoot more of those. But then when I'm out there and I shoot it, I just feel like I just don't feel like it's me. So
Alex,
that's
would you
some of
sort
it.
of you spoke to some of it already, but I'm interested to think, as you've evolved as an artist, you're a lot more conscious about how and why you're photographing. How would you describe some of the qualities that you're looking for or aiming for or aspiring towards, now and further looking further forward?
Um, I just want, well, one thing is mystery. So I want a photo to be mysterious potentially. And that goes back to excluding that context. Like if you don't know what was around this photo, like if you don't see the blue sky of that day and like the fact that I was standing near a sidewalk and like there's just a bunch of regular pine trees around this, and this one on the left actually was like green, just not very appealing regular green tree. I try to exclude all of the ordinary and try to elevate whatever that small detail is by like making it mysterious. So that's one thing, is if it's mysterious. Another potential thing is just kind of in the same vein, if it has like a certain atmosphere, like if it can take me away and make me feel like I'm not in the photo necessarily, because I would say that grand landscapes are probably better at that, like putting me right there. But if it can take me to another place, in terms of the feeling it gives me, which is really hard to articulate, and that's not the same for anyone looking at the photo. It's just what I see when I look at a photo. That's one thing I'm looking for. Balance, flow, symmetry, uh, like simplified idea. That all is important too. But I think the ones that really get me are like kind of mysterious, and they have like a very particular atmosphere to them. So I'm starting to be drawn more to light. Like I shot a lot of stuff in really flat light for a long time, because intimate can be shot in any sort of light. And like if you have like really strong light, it actually probably complicates the scene too much for stuff like that. But now I'm like super drawn to just plays of light like this. Like this is what I want to be doing, you know?
Yeah. Backlight can just be so, like if it's used well, it can just be so captivating, like with certain subjects.
Yeah.
I often find myself really drawn to backlight, especially when it comes to foliage. Like foliage just really sings.
Yeah, it just glows. And trees are, I mean, it's kind of weird. I just noticed like my entire portfolio now is almost all trees and dunes.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because they're both so reflective of light, number one. Number two, they can be simplified. Like even a complex tree, it kind of has like it's such a strong shape that it becomes simple to understand the photo. And then also it's the planet of trees. There are like trillions of trees out there. How are you not going to shoot trees, you know? And they have so much character, and each one is a living being. So
Yeah, I mean, we have a huge amounts of forest here in Tasmania, and I don't know any photographer that hasn't described that as being possibly the single greatest challenge to simplify a forest scene. I think maybe partly our landscape, the trees are very interwoven with each other. There's not as much probably physical separation, and you have to be very clever in terms of using light to isolate them or certain angles.
these are desert trees, man. Like I was saying, they stand on their own. Those forests are way harder to shoot.
Yeah, it's probably true of rainforests everywhere. Hey, it's just they're always chaotic environments. So
Less
yeah,
light in there too.
they're one of
This is like one of my only rainforest tree shots, because I found one that was right between these two that kind of gave it the symmetry, and then the spotlight passed over. But like without all that, it's just chaos in there.
Yeah,
Like
you would
everything
have had
had
a lot
to
of
line up.
you would have had a lot of practice up in Oregon, I imagine, with big
Yeah.
forested scenes.
I didn't come away with too many. Like that's I had to go back 7 years to show you a rainforest shot of mine that worked. So
I don't feel quite so bad then, because I'll still
no, yeah,
struggle
no,
with
it's
that
difficult. It's difficult. With the chaos of trees and forests, I think it's just key to have some
atmospheric.
structure to it. And I always look for symmetry too. Like this is like a super chaotic shot, but at the same time, it's just got these two main trees, right? Like giving it structure.
Well,
And then like,
it's got a beautiful resting point that grounds it at the base, and without that, it would just be
yeah,
chaos. And
that,
somehow
yeah,
that
there's that.
it settles the mind. It's like, oh, I've got something to stand on.
Yeah, and the
Engage
light
with
is
chaos.
almost a pattern in and of itself. So there's a lot of detail, but the pattern almost simplifies it in terms of understanding it. And then just the two main trees, or I guess it's three trees, but just the two sides framing it. I'm always looking for some simple thing within the chaos, and then emphasizing that.
I like the first tree with the is it lichen or moss growing on it, sort of almost pointing to
Lichen,
the next one as well.
yeah, it's in the wind, so
okay.
it's actually not 100% sharp on those parts. But I had a version with the moss hanging straight down, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is the one I'm going to use because it's sharp. And then I looked at this one, and like it had so much more energy to it, all swept off to the side.
yeah. Yeah, like light can just be either your best friend or your worst enemy with certain frames. Hey, like sometimes it'll just completely make or break a scene.
Yeah,
And yeah, utilizing it well and reacting to what the light's doing is such a key thing. I imagine for your workflow, like it's not about forcing a composition with whatever light you have. It's about using the light that's already existing and finding something that works with that. I imagine.
Alex, can we
yeah,
look at Woodfall just to speak about light? Because that's quite an unusual piece of light from what I saw.
Well, it's just unusual processing.
Okay.
I go into this in the new tutorial I just put out. It's I would say a very creative use of processing. This isn't what it looked like at all, but it's taking the idea of the light that was there and simplifying it to the extreme, making it only that. So this is not anywhere close to reality, but it is like, it's just the light that was there processed in this way.
So it's I mean, you can do a whole show on this, but in terms of just starting that conversation, where you particularly feel poetic license in terms of the type of post processing you use, and the kind of how much of leaving the landscape as the hero as opposed to just pouring your own creative vision into an image till it changes completely from what you're actually looking at. Like, is there an ethos around that? Do you feel complete freedom? Do you feel like some element of wanting to honor the landscape as a hero, or you're just totally free of that? Or that's a bit of a
well,
journey.
it depends on the photo. So like on that one, I just never would have used the photo. If you saw the raw, I mean, it's not appealing at all, but I would like the composition. So I really wanted it to work, and I started experimenting and just came up with this really crazy way of doing it. But as far as the like leaving the landscape alone, it really depends on the subject and the light. Like like something like this is really straightforward. This is like the blue and gold. It's just the way the camera sees white balance. Like I didn't do anything crazy to this. And like likewise for the ones next to it, like these are pretty straight images. I've almost done nothing to them aside from control distractions. And then I've got ones, I mean, this wasn't, people think it's winter, but this was like early fall, and it's almost green foliage. Like it was pretty dull, like overcast. So I was looking for a way to make the composition work in that light that was less than appealing.
Was the black and white mix like pretty key for making those leaves stand out really simply against the?
I don't think I even touched the mix. It's just
wow.
high key, so it's really bright, and these are black oaks, so they were a lot darker naturally than the surroundings. And then I toned down anything that wasn't the main trees, you know, like there's other trees in the frame you can see, but they're not
really
as
almost
high
reminds me of
contrast.
an infrared kind of image.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick that. I wouldn't pick that, Alex. That's clever, brother.
Well, I really liked the shape of the trees, but I wasn't happy with the light or color at the time. It was too early in fall, and the light was super flat that day. So what was the question though? The question was about having artistic license. So
yeah, the ethos, I guess. You know, there's a lot of conversations about that.
Well, getting back to why I got to intimate stuff, like I think it can be more mysterious when you exclude the context. So like you're left to wonder more about it. You don't have it all laid out in front of you. Like you don't get everything about it right away. So you have to think. And that's one of the things I like about these sorts of photos. Like, but another thing is that I'm able to put myself into it more, because if I did a grand landscape like those ones I was showing you, like I'm pretty much at the mercy of what looks correct to a degree. Like this is some artistic license because the sky was not this warm or cool. The sky was quite warm. You know, why would the sun be hitting the mountain and not the sky? I cooled down the sky to separate the mountain from it. But other than that, I just feel like it's just what it would look like to anyone there. Even more so on this, like I used to have a processing video on this, and I don't sell it anymore because it was old and I had poor video production quality at the time, but also I don't think that it really even gives you that much wiggle room to do anything on your own, right? Like what are you going to do to this scene to make it look like yours in post? Like what artistic license can you take with it? So that's one reason that I like the intimates, and I feel like I can do things that, like I try to keep it looking natural. I try to maintain the integrity of the subject for the most part. Like this is just totally straight. Like I was just trying to bring out the colors, the separate colors in the ferns, but I didn't do anything to that crazy. But like here, I couldn't do this sort of like making it look like a painting. I can't do that if I have the whole scene in front of you, right? Because you're going to see the shore and you're going to see reality. So you can't be taken to this place of, oh, that's a painting. like the imagination part of it. So I just feel like I do whatever is necessary to achieve whatever that atmosphere or feeling was that I had for the photo. And then where I draw the line is like I'm not blending anything from different areas. Like I really like to keep it in one frame almost. I almost never focus stack even unless necessary. Like this I required to focus stack for like 20 frames, but like otherwise these are pretty much all single exposures. And I just I don't like to do a ton of warping anymore. I just feel like that's kind of cheap, even though I do it sometimes when it's necessary to like shift the balance or fix a distraction. But like the tonality and the light, working the light, I just love to get creative with that, at least as far as I can take it, where you aren't thinking like, oh, he dragged this slider or that slider or did this particular thing. Like if it still kind of looks like the original to the point where I can fool you. And I guess that gets into like art. Is it a lie? Like should you I think that art should lie in order to like convince the person viewing it of something, whatever you want to convey. And I don't think photography is much different, but I still kind of keep the subject intact while doing that.
With that point, you've just recently been a judge for the Natural Landscape Photography Awards. Was it both years or just this year?
Last two, yeah.
Just last year. Yeah. How would you say
they kicked me out though? Not the next year.
How would you say your relationship with that kind of philosophy in your own work? How did you find that sort of interacting with the competition and its ethos?
Well, they had a lot more stringent rules than I did.
Yeah.
For myself, but I don't think that means that I couldn't like judge with their ideas in mind. They were so completely anti cloning, for example, but I could take anything that you would want to clone out and I could darken it to the point that it's not going to look like it's even there and essentially remove it from the image, and that'd be okay for them. And I think that that's kind of an arbitrary distinction. Like they would tell you that you're maintaining the integrity of the subject, but not really, because you've changed it so substantially that it becomes invisible in the image. And I don't think that I would draw that kind of arbitrary line. Like you can't change the pixels, but you can, like, you can't put different pixels here, but you can change them 99% so that they look like something else entirely. But I guess for a competition, you have to do that, right? You have to set some line. And
definitely a hard one to put a line on, and how far that line goes. And yeah,
that's a pretty good one, because you could change a photo so substantially that like it wouldn't even be landscape photography anymore just by shifting things around, blending.
I think they have a rule where you're allowed to remove movable objects.
Like
they did, but they're taking that away too.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
now it's just dust spots.
They're evolving with their rules, which I think is a sign of that they're looking at themselves and being organic and evolving with the times. It's sort of
Well, and I'm not criticizing it, by the way. I just for me, I don't see why that has to be a distinction, because outside of a competition context, like why would I care whether I cloned it or made it look invisible by darkening it? But one's okay and one's not. So like I certainly do, like a lot of my photos would not be okay in NLPA, but a lot of them would, because like this one's like straight up nothing but a black and white conversion and then like dodging and burning.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's a way bigger departure from what the actual scene was than something where I did some cloning.
Yeah.
Did you guys have some big conversations, Alex, over the years as judges around your feedback on where those lines were?
A little bit, but I didn't really. I mean, they have a thing they want to do, and I don't want to push it too much. And I would say that I probably process more than any of the organizers would be comfortable with if my images were entered. So I just try to judge photos on their composition and their merit is how well they work as photos, rather than what was done to them. Like that wasn't really up to the judges. It wasn't like, hey, do you think this is okay? That was up to the organizers.
In the bigger picture, Alex, do you think it's important to have a competition like that on the global scene that that at least, and intention is trying to keep the nature of the hero rather than, really focus on extreme sort of post-production techniques. Where do you see its role in landscape photography from a global perspective?
Well, I think it's great because so many other competitions do reward like heavy processing to the point where a straight photo couldn't possibly compete, which I think was their whole reason for creating it in the first place. And I really agree with the fact that that is more likely to elevate quieter work that's not as obvious. Like, I don't think that a lot of my quiet photos would have any chance if I were to enter them today in International Landscape Photographer of the Year. And I think the reason that I was able to win that is because at the time I was shooting, even within the intimates, I was shooting louder things and like more obvious, more colorful things. And like, I'd like that there's a competition that will celebrate less obvious and quieter work. And it's just, how can you compete, especially for a judge that has to look through thousands of thumbnails? How can something really quiet compete with all the louder things around it? Like, that's already a problem in NLPA, trying to see every single image and recognize it like on its merit rather than what's just popping out at you when you're looking through that many photos. And then imagine that they're all like able to be crazy composites where you can't even tell what really happened. And
Does
it's
the
just
categorization within the competition help with that? Because I believe there's small, intimate, and abstract sort of categorizations within the comp.
yeah, sort of, but people entered their own categories when they entered, so then we had to recategorize things sometimes, and you'd be surprised the number of things that went in grand landscape that are nowhere near grand landscape, or more commonly the things in intimate that are nothing close to intimate, or abstract that aren't abstract at all. Actually, that's the biggest thing of all. People think that anything over 70 millimeters is abstract somehow, but it's like, abstract means you can't tell what it is. It's an abstraction of reality. And there are just so many straight photos in the abstract category that we had to move.
Yeah.
It's really obvious what this is. It's just a photo of a thing that you took at a long focal length. Doesn't make it an abstract. So
yeah, Alex, from afar, looking at the culture of photography in the US, I think like there was a big period of time where things like 500 PX or whatever it was, and all sorts of things. I look on there and I wouldn't see anything that didn't look like it was a focal blend or a warped out of existence, or a completely sort of fantasized landscapes as being what was held as with great reverence and was really rising to the fore of what people are into. And not judging what that is, it does or doesn't mean. It was more of a reflection on where you feel like the culture of US landscape photography is relative to other places. Like the
yeah, I kind of
British seems to be a lot cleaner and simpler and a little bit more intimate orientated. The Australians probably a little bit more in between, maybe a little bit closer. It's certainly to the Tasmanian culture is really quite traditional. And it's been the US, from what I've seen, that's been leading the fray into being a lot more experimental and technique orientated, and you could actually argue having a lot of freedom of the tools that they apply to scenes. And I was just curious to get your reflections on. That's a big question, but
that's a good question.
You're a good person to ask. So,
well, I think that maybe part of the thing in the US is that we had Mark Adamus over here kind of leading the charge for pushing photos farther than anyone ever did before. It's crazy if you go back and look at where he first posted his photos. I think photo.net was one of the first ones. Like even before 500px, before Flickr, maybe around the same time as the original NPN, he was posting photos that people, if you go look at the comments, they were so upset that he was like oversaturating something. You look at it now, it's like, that's nothing. Like, that's a totally straight photo that could win NLPA. Like, and at the time it was so crazy because digital was so new to all these people. It's like, aside from shooting on Velvia, they'd never seen anything that colorful. And that's just gotten more and more extreme as more people follow that example. And by the way, I respect Mark and what he does, even if it's not my cup of tea anymore, like as far as what I do in my own photography. But yeah, I think because of that, the US probably had a lot bigger of a, well, they were influenced a lot more by that sort of thing because he was local. And also, I guess American culture, hate to admit, is probably a lot trashier, a lot less classy, a lot more about big and better and extreme everything.
Well,
And
bombastic, I
I don't
suppose.
like, yeah, bombastic. That's a good word. I don't like to be lumped in with American photography necessarily because of that perception. Like, I feel like I'm certainly not as like I don't go for as natural look as Joe Cornish, but I identify a lot more with that sort of work than like with Mark's these days. And you're not hearing my computer audio, are you? My Discord notifications.
No.
Not so
Okay.
good. The noise cancelling's doing its job.
Um, yeah, so I brought this image up because as an example, like this is the tallest peak in the lower 48, which you always have to say because Alaska has the most extreme version of everything and it's separate, it's its own thing. But in the contiguous US, this is the tallest peak. It's beautiful. It's an incredible shot. This is, or not incredible shot, incredible peak. And this is untouched, right? This is not warped or stretched. And people would stretch this peak like, so it looks like the Matterhorn. Like it has to be the pointiest, tallest thing in the world. Why? Is this not enough? Is it not jagged enough? Like, isn't this world class sort of mountain? And like that's where it went, is you have to make everything so extreme. Everything has to be stretched to be taller and bigger and pointier. And I don't I don't subscribe to that at all. Like if I am over processing something, it's that I'm cloning too much stuff out to simplify it. It's not that I'm stretching it anymore. And I used to do that for sure, like many years ago. But yeah, I really don't appreciate that that avenue for photography because it just desensitizes everyone to what's extreme. And then like an actual really great moment of light and a really clever composition might just be overshadowed by something that's just pushed way too far. And like I just feel like people don't even stop to look anymore at things that are quieter. And yeah,
Like
I don't like it.
the pendulum certainly has started to swing the other way a little bit the last year or two. I feel like
Yeah,
has been helping
yeah.
with that.
Oh,
That
certainly, yeah.
2016 sort of era was like really just, yeah, the
I
mid
forgot that was what the question was
teens.
about. Yeah, that
Um,
was, it was
it's
crazy at the
getting
time.
pretty insane. And it was like pretty, like really 90% of the stuff you were seeing was very Mark Adamus, or like, yeah, very bombastic style, warped everywhere.
I
And
was part of the problem, by the way. I was doing the same thing at the time,
yeah.
but I've turned
Yeah,
away from it
it's been really
sharply.
cool to see like that shift back towards like a natural sort of style. And I think there's a place for both, and there's a place for people with all sorts of approaches. But it's just nice to have a mix and people representing the true landscape and appreciation of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see.
Alex, do you feel like it's coming back around a bit?
Well, yeah, but I don't think that I don't know that everyone doing intimate shots now is doing it because they really like it or because it's the trend. But I kind of hate when it's said now that intimate is trendy because I'm just trying to do something more classic, I think, like a William Neal or Charles Kramer, like these guys that were big on film pre-digital, like the last few decades of the century. They were generally not doing anything like ultra wide and epic, and it was just a lot quieter, more thoughtful work. And I'm trying to emulate, like, if anything, go in that direction, older, not like, oh, this is the trendy new thing. So I kind of hate that idea. But um yeah, I do think it's swinging. I don't think that quiet work still has much of a chance on social media because of the way it's all set up and how quickly it's designed to keep you scrolling, and you still have to compete with loud stuff. And like, not that my work is even all that quiet. Like there are people with a lot more subtle work than I have. And I mean, how are they going to build a following? I built my following off loud work a long time ago. And now I am reaping the rewards by being able to do whatever I want. I've already got my following built. But like if you're starting fresh with that, you're kind of incentivized to go bigger and louder in order to grab attention, right?
Alex, what would you
So
describe as following? What is the current kind of currency, as it were, for having followers of a kind, and where do you see that evolving to or dropping away from? Because things are changing.
Oh yeah. Well, the most valuable is the mailing list, which, mine's only a percentage of all my social media accounts combined, but like those people are far more engaged than the random people on social media.
Mm.
Instagram still seems to be a good platform despite all its flaws because I have the biggest reach there out of all my accounts. Like Facebook seems long dead. It's weird. I had a weird growth spurt there the last couple of years. Like I wasn't doing anything, and it just like quadrupled my following. I think I was recommended or something. But it's just so highly dependent on the algorithm, and I don't think people are opening Facebook all that often. At least anyone under 40 or so. Yeah. Not to say 40 is old, but just like I don't think kids these days are using Facebook, and so I think it's going to keep falling off. And then like people tried Vero, and now I know I don't use Vero because I don't want to open 5 social media apps every time I want to post a photo. So I just go to Instagram because I'm probably going to reach the most people. And then if you want to see it better, you can look at my website. But I don't know, man. I'm not a big social media expert because I have a pretty decent following, but it was built before it was so difficult now. And I have gone on like 3-4 month breaks at a time regularly where I just don't post anything. And then as a result, my followings have been like completely stagnant. Like I think I've been at 177,000 for like 4 years now because I lose an equal number as I gain all the time. It's like 100 gained and 100 lost every single day. And then if I post something, like the people that followed me long ago, I assume are just like, oh, this is boring, I'm going to unfollow because I came to you for like a big landscape 5 years ago, and probably like 8-9 years ago now. But yeah, I just can't seem to grow at all, which is fine because I have like a dedicated group of people, especially those on the mailing list, that seem to really care about what I'm doing, regardless of what it is.
That's
Alex, I feel
definitely my experience as well with Instagram in terms of the growth and decline aspect. So I don't think it's a unique case by any means, and that Instagram cleans out the ghost accounts. So it's probably better that it happens in dribs and drabs like that rather than, I think they used
Yeah,
to
I'm
do
sure that could be part of it
mega
too.
culls where you'd lose 10,000 followers in a day or something. So at least they don't do that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Luke's had a pretty big account for a long time, and it's been interesting when just from afar watching when he said periods of time where he hasn't been posting how that has or hasn't influenced things. But
it's very true what he was saying about if you haven't posted for a while and then you do post, you think, oh, it'll be a new burst of activity, I'll get some more followers. But it is quite common to actually lose more followers when you start again. It takes a while to build up a bit of a, I call it like an inertia or what have you, and get that growth happening again. So
yeah, you have to be engaged all the time, which
Mm.
like I have become increasingly more hermit-like as I've gotten older. I'm not old, but I used to want to engage a lot more. It was a lot more of a novel thing to me, and now I don't feel like it so much. Like I
Alex,
post a photo, it's like I hardly have anything to say. I just want the photo to say something, but you have to say something.
do you feel like it's relevant to upcoming photographers still? Like, is it sort of not worth going down that road because it's just so hard to make progress, or it's still the more
Oh, it's
relevant
a good place to
platform? Or...
network. I think you should probably be on social media regardless, so you can see a lot of people's work, see what they're up to, and like comment or have them comment, like just to network with people. Because I feel like one of the coolest things about landscape photography is that I know so many people around the world. Like I wouldn't be talking to you guys if I didn't make pictures. And like that's true for everyone I've met through photography. Like I might know 1,000 people through it, and then that's pretty much all through social media. I mean, you're not going to meet people through a mailing list for the most part. So like I think it's valuable in that way, but I don't know as far as growing a business, I don't know what the return on investment is there.
Well, Alex, here's a question for you: where if you're looking at legacy for yourself, for instance, and you might be, up in heaven looking back, or further down the track in your life, like where do you see your legacy being relative to online, relative to print, relative to book, relative to the experiences you've left with people through your workshops? Where do you feel sort of where you'd like your legacy to exist?
Well, I don't think about it that much, but I have considered, just because I'm frightened by my own mortality, that like, man, I should probably preserve all this work. So I bought 10 years on my website just for the registration. I don't know what I'd do as far as the hosting. Because like, yeah, I could have prints, you could buy prints and then maybe a couple hundred people ever would have the photos, and like then I don't know, tens of thousands I'm sure could see it online. So regardless of what's where I'd ideally like my work to be, you have to admit that online is how most people are going to see it. So yeah, I have thought about like archiving the website. I gave TJ Thorne access to all my full-size files if he wants to handle prints, if anyone gives a shit when I pass. And but no, as far as legacy, I think that a lot of it will be in teaching, because I was looking back at my Dropbox where I was storing all my recordings with clients many years ago when I was doing like Skype sessions, teaching processing. And it surprised me that I had like hundreds of people in there from like dating back 10 years. And I looked at a video and I was teaching a lot of the same things I do now, just in processing. And I have to imagine that that might be the way that I've touched a lot of people, like just showing them stuff, showing them how I do things. But I would like it to be the thoughtfulness of my work. Like I would like that to be what was remembered. If I'm thinking about that, is like I'd like the portfolio and like an appreciation of it to be a thing. But I don't know. I'll be dead. Who cares? I won't be in heaven looking back down. But maybe I'll be part of the one consciousness in the universe. Who knows?
There's been a lot of books that have been coming out, landscape photography books that have kind of come out since, I don't know, 2020 or
Oh,
something.
books. I would like to have books out. Yes.
Yeah. So that's something that you'd like to do down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to have, not just down the line, I think maybe next year for a first book.
Oh, there you go.
Um,
Current work in progress.
Here to hear, folks.
well, the idea is still percolating, so I need to solidify it. I think it'll be on the desert. I think that is like the big theme of my work that I care about.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to just be like a greatest hits book. I want it to at least have some organization and a theme and an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, a book would be like my most proud legacy, the thing that I would be most proud of leaving behind. I hate to use the word legacy because it's so, I don't know, self-centered maybe, but you said it. I'm just answering the question.
That was my word. I'll take that on the chin.
But yeah, no, I'd like to leave a book behind. I feel like that's a pretty definitive like work, a collection, an expression of everything that I did. If I could put all my best desert work in a book, that'd be awesome. But even if it sells really well, what, 1,000 people have it? And like I looked at my 500px, which isn't of much value to me. I don't even think about it, but I looked at it sometime in the last year and I had like multiple millions of views on there. So whatever your most proud thing is, like if it's prints or books, like it just pales in comparison to what your biggest impact probably was online. Like my Google Plus account, for some reason, back when that was a thing, my photos got shared on their TV or something, like Google Chromecast, and I think they still might be on there. So I got these emails from people I grew up with, like, "Hey, I saw your name on the TV," and like I didn't even know you were doing photography. And I looked at the view counts on there. It's like millions. It's like millions of people have seen photos through that. And then like if I sell a book, maybe 500 or 1,000 people will see it. And so there's like the number and like the vast impact, and then there's the part that I'd be most proud of separately.
And in terms of, I guess, thinking of the future, like how do you see photography going with AI coming through? And always interested to get perspectives on how people see that.
I think that it's kind of scary how good an AI can be, but at the same time, unless you're feeding an AI my particular portfolio and then having it make photos that it thinks look like mine, I don't particularly feel threatened because I feel like what I'm doing is it's different enough from most work out there that I feel like it's mine. And AI looks to me right now like an amalgamation of everything I've ever seen. Like it looks like everything I've ever seen on Instagram, but just really clean. And it's like,
Nature of it
cool.
doesn't
Yeah.
really lend itself to uniqueness. Like
Cool to
it's
see that for the millionth time. Yeah.
Well, you might have put yourself in a corner there, man. If you've had millions and millions of views and they're running off algorithms for what they see online, you might be more
Yeah. Well, but I only have 400 photos or something. So is that enough to train an AI to be me?
I see what you mean. Yeah, good point.
Maybe. But no, I think that like if I look at this, like I don't have any other photos like this because I just found it. It's at a new place and it was like a new idea for me. And I think that we will always have the ability to do something new, and AI is always going to be working on like what it's fed with, right? So I don't think that you feed all of my photos into an AI and then it comes out with this ever, because it doesn't look like anything I've done. So I'm always confident in my ability to try to find something new, like not every time I go out and shoot, but down the line, I'm sure I'll come up with something that a computer couldn't have.
I think in some ways it might even make that kind of work even more important and interesting to people when the world's just going to be saturated by generated imagery and there's still people out there that choose to make it and have that point of difference, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe people will be more interested in intimates, like genuinely, when they see that like an AI can take every postcard ever made and then make the same shot that they would have made at a viewpoint. Like it's just, yeah, I don't want to do anything that a computer could be doing, but I don't know, maybe I'm underestimating it. Maybe it could learn. And I just feel like that we all have something really, um, that sounds cliche, really unique to offer. We all have our own particular blend of inputs, right? Like our entire life and all of our influences and all of our artistic preferences. Like I'm so particular about so many things. And so that's why I think I'll come up with a photo that looks like mine, not because I'm talented, but because I uh, am uniquely me and you're uniquely you. And like if you actually think about your photography enough to, or not think about it, if you allow yourself to get away from whatever you think you should be making, like turn that off and just try to react and see and experiment, then anyone I think could make something that no one else could make. And
sorry.
Oh, that's yeah. So I feel optimistic that AI won't be able to do that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I was just going to say, with new kind of being the word of the conversation just there, do you ever see yourself kind of I don't know, do you see yourself kind of just continually refining your current approach, or do you ever see yourself kind of, I don't know, experimenting with something a little different? And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. I get bored. Like
yeah,
I feel like I need to try something new.
mm,
And I feel like I've got certain photos that are flashes of something new that I just stumbled upon that I want to explore more.
yeah,
That one I was just showing, or this thumbnail here, this is like the insane extreme end of simplification, right? Like if you look at those other Dune shots and think they're simple, well, how about this? This is a line.
yeah,
It's like one of my favorite shots.
yeah,
So I I feel like there is more ability to try totally new things, but I have to recognize when I start pulling on that thread, you know, like this is more derivative. This looks a lot, actually, if I go over to this one, this looks a lot like Rainbow Rider, which is one of my favorite shots from like 6 years ago. So I don't feel like I was being particularly creative with that. I just like that tree. It was really just doing the same thing again.
yeah,
Whereas some of the other shots are like, oh, that really is fresh. Like maybe I should try to do more like that.
yeah.
Alex, I'm gonna. Oh, do you mind if I jump in, Lucky? Or...
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking one thing we haven't really touched on, which I'd love to do before we sort of rounded out the show, is to speak about the kind of influences you have outside the medium of photography that may
Oh
shape
yeah.
whether it's musical or artistic or cinematic and that kind of thing. And probably secondary to that, and maybe in addition, the kind of influences you've had as a photographer. You spoke about being influenced by Mark a little bit. I know you did a lot of work with William. You spent time with TJ. Like, just getting a sense of how other people and other artistic forms and mediums have shaped sort of the way you see and what you're drawn and excited by, and maybe where
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So I have, well, when I look back at my older work, it's like very much a copy of the Mark Adamus sort of idea, right? Like just go make an epic front to back sort of shot. Like this is more a Mark shot than a me shot, I think, because I was pretty much just trying to do what I saw him do. All I did was show up. And I think that losing the thread of the question. Remind me.
It was a pretty broad one. So just, and I guess influences,
Oh
what
yeah, influences.
shaped how you
So
see and what you're drawn to. And
yeah, so we all have our blends of inputs, like I was saying, or influences. And I think that before I was kind of having a singular influence. Like it wasn't just Mark. I was also looking at other people doing great wide landscape work, but I was pretty much trying to do the same thing as this group of people that were all doing it really well. And I had kind of a singular focus on that. But I think that my work got more personal when I started allowing more influences in, like outside of that, like outside of having a particular person I'm trying to copy. I have this little idea I'll pull from here. Like, I really like how this person does this thing, and I'll start incorporating that. Or like, I like how this video game I played had this like place that this photo makes me feel like. So I'll push it in that direction to make it feel more like that place. Or like in this movie, like that shot that was unforgettable from this film. And like, I think it's just the blend of all of that that makes us who we are, or at least it makes me who I am. Like, I don't feel that I'm some great creative person. I always thought that I was a really analytical person and that I would never be creative. I can't believe that I'm an artist for a living. Like I was working in computers before. I thought that I was just very, I don't know if that's left or right brained. I don't know. But I thought I was very technical and not very artistic. But what I've learned is that even with that sort of mindset, that technical mindset or analytical mindset, if I just blend all of my influences, especially outside of photography, and let all of that inform it, my particular blend is going to be different than anyone else's. And so that's what makes me me, is not that I'm like, I have some singular focus, although I kind of do now. Like I really know what I like and what I don't. But I think it just all came from all of those inputs. Like I think that's really important.
And I guess now that you've settled down a bit more than the transitory life that you had, are you? Does that also make you feel like you want to stay a bit more local in what you're shooting as well, and or do you still have the same desire to travel?
No, I want to travel, but I do think that my best work is made somewhere that I have more time. So, like this, I think might be one of my strongest sets of work, and all of this, almost all of it, was made in Zion in one season, and now I live an hour away from Zion, and
Wow.
so I can, well, and this stuff is maybe 3.5 hours away, but all of this is within a half day's drive of me, like pretty much everything on this year. And I feel like I am in range of where I've made all my best work, and I can continue to explore it and find new things there. And like Zion is a world-class national park. Like you could shoot just Zion for the rest of your life, and it's got enough hidden there that you wouldn't ever run out, really. But at the same time, I want to travel because sometimes you get in a rut, doing the same thing every time. And seeing a new place can inspire you. I don't think that I make that good of work when I go to new places unless it's really small, though. Like went to this place in Oregon that like I didn't know at all, and this was my best shot there because like it was the one thing that compelled me. But if I were to try to make a photo of the creek where this was taken, like, or the forest, like it would be so incredibly boring I don't know anything about it. I haven't connected with it. But
Mm.
like if I go to a new place, I'm more likely to make a photo like this than a postcard shot because it's the only thing that stood out to me as me. And this was actually made in the same place. Like I was just drawn in by this foam
Mm.
in like this beautiful place with a wonderful waterfall and great forest. Like it's like an idyllic scene for Oregon that you would think would be the subject, but for me, it was just this little detail. It was the only thing I could connect with.
Mm.
Like,
So
a galaxy, nebula, and stars to me.
yeah, I like when things look like something else. That's actually something I'm looking for in a photo. When earlier you asked me what I was looking for and I gave you a really long-winded answer, I think the short answer is when something looks like something else, when it can take me to something else. And I love space, by the way, which is funny because people think I hate Milky Way photography, and I just think the Milky Way always looks the same, from one hemisphere or the other. We have two ways that the Milky Way is ever going to look. So that's kind of why I am not drawn to it, because like I don't feel like I can do anything with it that makes it mine. But I love space. Holy, space is so cool. And anything that can take me there, like a wide angle Milky Way photo doesn't take me there, but like something like this where I can imagine that I'm looking down in this black hole or something, that's really what I want in an ideal photo, is something that takes me somewhere else, maybe even off this world.
I was going to
And
ask you about that because I would have thought that out under those desert skies, you'd have some amazing clear nights and see
Oh
some
yeah.
Milky Way and that kind of thing. But and I notice you don't have so much night photography in your portfolio, but it is good to
No.
do that so you don't so you can get a bit of sleep.
um yeah, I have, shit, I don't know where I would look for that. I have back in the day, like 2010, I guess I shot my first Milky Way, but like 10 through 13 I was shooting a lot of night photography and like deep twilight photography. That was actually probably how I built a lot of my following initially. It was like, oh, you see that thing Mark Adams did? Well, I did that, but I did it at twilight and I put stars there instead. Like that was sort of my shtick for the first couple of years. But um, yeah, I love the night. Actually, I'm kind of a night owl. I like the peace of night. And I actually like the process oriented approach to night photography, like how it requires more of a technical mindset and like it's more of a slow and deliberate thing. You can't really just like react to something. I like that about it. I just don't like the results for me. Like I don't think that I can differentiate myself using a subject that looks pretty similar. And I love light. I love dealing with light. But that being said, I'm like a huge space buff, and like anything that can take me to that place in my mind where where other people see the Milky Way and they think about being in space, like I like that too. I see it in smaller things, I guess.
Alex, who are the photographers out there in the world, in a very, very broad spectrum that you're drawn to, that you get excited by, or that you
You ever
might
see this guy?
find connecting with?
Charles Kramer, I think, is like, oh my God, he's so good. I mean, you got to look through this. This guy is insane. He has the most ridiculous, oh, there it is. There it is. It's the photo I wanted to show. The most ridiculous portfolio of classy work. Um, and
Oh, wow.
like he is so good. If I could grow up to be a photographer, it would be Charles Kramer. Or Guy Tall, or some blend of them, because Guy Tall is sort of like just as prolific and just as good of an artist, but he's more like I guess less literal and more like creative with the post processing and the light than Charles. So like some blend of that, like this really classic um like film approach, right? And then Guy's like super artistic, like creative approach. If I can borrow influences from that, like I'm probably making images that I like. So I would say those two, and William Neal, who I have the fortunate enough to work with and lead workshops with now.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are.
Interesting that they're from a slightly different generation than us as well, that you're so drawn to.
Yeah, see, I'm not really drawn to contemporary work so much, and like that's what's interesting to me about how I built my following and how I came up as a photographer is like I was looking at Mark Adamus, who's like pretty much influenced the entire current generation, right? Like you can see his fingerprints on everything on Instagram, and I still think Mark does it better than anyone because it's him. But like
Do you
I
want to
don't
put up his
identify with
website
that so
while
much.
we're talking about it?
Mark?
I thought, yeah, you might as well. We've
Yeah.
spoken about it on the show.
Well, number one, he's just always going to some crazy place that that no one's literally ever been, like, or any person with a camera or any sort of talent with a camera has ever been. Like he'll just put himself in the middle of nowhere, some Alaskan winter, 50 degrees below zero, and like find some peak that no one's ever photographed. Like I think that's really cool. But actually that's something on creativity. I don't feel like I can be creative when I'm uncomfortable. And so if I were to be hiking in this sort of oops, this is one of my favorite shots of his, old school. If I were to be here, I probably would be so miserable I wouldn't even be able to create anything. um, but he's just got such an insane ability to put up with that and also be productive at the same time. I guess he's not even putting up with it. He just likes it. He likes the pain or the extreme. I don't want to work that hard because it puts me out of creative mindset, and I'm only thinking about how uncomfortable I am. I have to feel
Oh,
at peace.
you're out in the desert a lot, Alex. There's a lot of people that wouldn't be comfortable out there. So
The desert is peaceful though, man. And I go in like in summer, but in fall and winter, like all the desert work that I was showing you, that was pretty much all fall and spring. So like it is beautiful weather. Like I'm wearing a jacket because it's a little brisk out, but it's not too cold, not too hot. It's just wonderful weather in the off seasons, and I am very comfortable. And the thing is, you can drive a lot of places in the desert, like I was saying early on. So you can get yourself in a really cool place without a lot of exertion, and then just kind of wander around and focus more on the photography and less on the hiking and getting there. Which I have plenty of photos too that have taken a lot of effort, like some backpacking photos, like mountains. But like I was so limited in what I could do this particular day because it was like 10 miles in the backcountry at 10,000 feet, and I wasn't even acclimated, and like I was just so uncomfortable. Like all I could do was sit by this lake shore and get lucky that some light passed by, but I wasn't like in a place to be creative because it wasn't my number one concern anymore. But anyway, Mark is like superhuman in that way. Like he's just out there in places that most people would never even be able to handle, and he's also able to just work his camera and search for new things.
Back to Kramer, it was just amazing just seeing the date, like the date stamp on that photo, like 1982 is like 40 years ago.
This one?
This, the one that you had up, the Misty one, 1982 down there. It's just
there,
like such incredible quality for an image that's twice as old as me. Like it's it's
and it's a lot harder to make an image of that quality on film, and it's all about composition, which I guess I haven't really even mentioned, but that's the number one thing I think in any photograph is like how you've arranged everything. These photos are all completely reliant on his brilliant compositions, and so like the fact that they're completely natural doesn't really matter because the composition is so brilliant. Like he doesn't need to do anything to them to make them so good.
He's
brilliant.
The Peter Dombrovskis as like the sort of hero of film a few decades ago, and I don't think his collection was probably quite as prolific, but Luke, maybe correct me on that, I'm not sure. But looking at his work too, it's just mind-blowing to see such quality images that hold up to today's standard of far easier cameras to work with. That is just mind-blowing work to look at, and especially considering the kind of effort they go into to get to those places with medium film. It's just, rather than a light little mirrorless camera with stabilization and all this stuff, it's it's incredible.
I actually feel like the fact that it's so easy now, like I feel like I make sloppier work sometimes because it's so, like I can get away with handheld because of the stabilization, and I don't need to be on a tripod and be so deliberate about it. But that's not necessarily a good thing because I mean I should probably slow down and think about it more. but it's a nice balance between, or you're trying to balance between your harnessing your intuition and like being deliberate enough to avoid issues in your compositions.
A little bit to do with the genre, I think, Alex. Like I'm, as you probably know, I love aerial photography, and the reason why I like it is
Yeah,
almost no cerebral conversation going at all, because your composition is changing every half a second, and it becomes a completely intuitive,
you're
reactive
very reactive. Yeah,
process. There's almost no playing at
there's
all once you're actually up in the air, so it's totally different.
yeah. Well, unless you're using a drone, which I was for like this stuff, and then you can plan it out ahead of time or take another flight there. I can't even imagine hanging out the side of a plane and having to react.
Yeah, I love it, man.
There's a
Love it.
particular photo I'm looking for here that will illustrate one of my earlier points, but um, did I veer off your original question there?
I can't even remember what the original question was.
We were talking about,
Okay,
I mean,
We've gone
earlier
down
on,
rabbit holes. Rabbit holes are
it was
good.
about influences, really.
Yeah.
And we've gone through.
Oh, so yeah, I just love that that classic look, like that's what I want to do, but I also am not afraid to use post processing like in a more modern way to achieve my goals. So I think that if I have any sort of contribution, it's just like that blend of that classic sort of composition, like tighter, more intimate um, arrangements combined with like maybe a more bold use of processing and light, probably partially afforded by my ability to shoot on digital, things you couldn't have done on film before.
Yeah.
I don't
Alex,
know
do
where
you
it
have any?
is.
Do you have any more contemporary photographers whose work you're drawn to, or maybe people that no one's heard of? I know you're pretty good at shouting out people sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Something I really appreciate for you, like up and comers or people to
Well,
watch.
let me consult my list. I have a list of
The list.
Oh.
actually off the top of my head. Sarah Marino is constantly uh, influencing me, and I think she's just great. She's
Yeah, I'd love to get her on the show one day. She's up for it.
she is so good, and I think because she shoots quieter things, like I guess, well, she has a big following, but like it's not as easy to build that sort of recognition on like small plants, and the fact that she has and does, that's crazy.
Yeah, she's not afraid to allow silence to be the
Yeah,
artist's voice in a lot of her work,
that's
which I really
I
appreciate.
look at her, I look at Charles, and I'm like, then I look at my own work, I'm like, oh, it's cartoony, I should pull it back. um let's see. Yeah, so Guy, I already mentioned. Charles, well, Guy's sort of, I mean, he's still doing it, he's contemporary. Actually, Charles, I think, is still shooting too.
Really awesome.
He's he's a very nice man. I met him at Out of Yosemite conference in Yosemite, like 2020.
Mm.
And he was showing his processing. He's super technical, actually, for being a film guy. Like, he has leaned into Photoshop now, but it's all curves layers. Like, he's all
Mm.
classic tools.
Yeah.
Man, Adam Gibbs, Alistair Ben.
Mm.
I love Theo Bosboom's work. His is really good. Charlotte Gibb.
Mm.
I'm just consulting a list here because I can't think of everyone off the top of my head. I made a list once of a
I can
lot of
recommend
people that are
Theo's
inspiring.
books to everyone listening. Theo,
Yeah,
a few good, brilliant
his
books.
book is awesome.
I've got
Yeah,
Shaped by the Sea, and I would love his Iceland one too. Really, some of the most creative work I've ever seen. So,
I
yeah,
have Shaped by the Sea. Yeah, it's awesome.
yeah.
I had to stop buying photo books because we lived on the road and they're big and heavy, but now I can buy more. Yeah, I didn't mention Christopher Burkett, but he's an old school film guy that's
Mm.
sort of along these lines, like a lot of tree work. Definitely a big influence.
Mm.
Yeah. Even Mark Adamus kind of reminds me of why I got into photography. So even though I'm not making work like that so much anymore, every time I look at his work, it kind of reminds me of that first spark that I had.
Mm.
And like, oh, maybe I could get out and like focus more on light and conditions a little more than I do, instead of just everything being so quiet.
Mm.
Weather, it's a big thing in his work. It's like weather in every shot.
Mm.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I'd say Charles and Guy are my top photographers. Um,
We might start to kind of getting towards the end. I'd say before we finish up, it'd be great to have you just like tell us a little about this new tutorial about Simplify. And
Yeah.
yeah, because like it's such a big thing in your work, as we've talked about a few times now, just like simplifying those chaotic scenes and both through your
Yeah.
composition and how you process. And yeah, we'd love to just whatever you're happy to tell us about that. It'd be great for to learn a bit more about it.
Yeah, well, I have a chapter on composition that's not like, it's not definitive by any means, because that is just a huge subject that could be a whole video series, and I still wouldn't be able to teach it all. It's so personal anyway, but I do have a chapter on how I find these compositions, like how I pick them out of the landscape, kind of like demonstrating the wider scene and then where I found that shot in the wider scene. And I have a chapter on curation, which we haven't talked about, but it's basically the simplification of your portfolio. Like, I think that is one of my strengths, is that I curate so tightly that I'm pretty good at showing you only my best work and not any of my terrible images for the most part.
Yeah, David Thompson's another person I really appreciate in that regard. In terms of your guys' circle, he's pretty
David's
tight.
awesome. David, early influence as well, by the way. Yeah, I feel like that's such a huge thing. Like, I take so many bad photos, but I'm just, I guess, patient enough now to try not to show you most of them, because I let the excitement die down. I have a whole process of curation, so that's one thing I cover in there. And then the rest of it's kind of just this idea of simplification, with some talks about composition and how that's working in each shot, but more focused on processing, like how I'm toning down all the distractions and simplifying within the frame. It's sort of like when you put a photo in a light box and you have all of this turned off around the photo and it's just the photo. Like, I want to do that in the frame for my subject. I want the subject to have a light box around it. So like an extreme example would be this one here. Like, maybe I took it too far. Maybe it's a little too processed looking plastic, but like, I didn't really do much cloning. I did some, but mostly it's just letting the subject speak for itself without distraction. So that's what the tutorial is all about. And like, you'd be surprised how huge of transformations some of my shots are with just like curves layers for the most part. I mean, I do some advanced stuff when necessary, but also I use a lot of simple tools. I just use them 50 times over to eliminate every distraction that I can. So I think that's like really important. And before, in my tutorials, I was trying to show some more extreme conversions, extreme examples of how I arrived at some of these shots, like more creative things. But in this one, I think I show you more like how 90% of my portfolio is made, like just the stuff I'm doing on everything, just simplifying. And I think that's why the photos look clean. Like, people couldn't really put their finger on it over the years. Like, I got a lot of questions on like how your photos look so clean or perfect, which I see all sorts of flaws. They're not perfect, but I think what they're getting at is just that I've eliminated distractions. So that's what it's all about.
Are you mainly using Photoshop or Lightroom, or do you have a particular tool set outside?
Both. Yeah. So, well, Lightroom I think is best for curation, actually, just organizing photos, which I've only gotten on board with in the last couple of years. I was old school with Bridge and just browsing my files before, but you can only see up to 9 thumbnails at a time on Bridge, so it's not going to cut it for organization. But yeah, I use Lightroom for organization, and I process the RAWs in there, even though I would rather do it in Camera Raw, because in Lightroom, the zooming mechanism is so incredibly obnoxious. Like, the zooming in and out on a click, and then no scrubby zoom unless you hold shift, and you're in the develop module, and you're not in a field right now, because if you're dragging your exposure right now, you can't hold shift to scrubby zoom. You have to hit enter first. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant. Lightroom is great, but Adobe Camera Raw does all of the same things, but it's less annoying to use. So
snappier too.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll pull the photo into Photoshop as a smart object and then open it back up in Camera Raw and do it there, because I'm just so annoyed by a few things you can't change in Lightroom. But yeah, like, I get a photo 90% of the way there in Lightroom, and then the last 10% in Photoshop, but that last 10% probably takes me 10 times as long. So that's pretty much where all the effort is in the details, and then Lightroom is kind of for the big picture ideas sort of stuff. Luminance selections are still not usable to my eye.
Yeah,
they're not clean enough.
Yeah,
like if you want to get really detailed and clean,
mm.
got to learn Photoshop. But yeah, the tutorial is like not, I don't think it's overly technical. I think people would be surprised how simple most of the tools I use are, because I am really more focused on the ideas, which is really all you need to know, because there's multiple ways to do everything. Like you can go learn from other people how to do the same things in a more complex way or a flashier way. But it's just about what you want to do. It's not about how you do it. You can think of 3 different ways to do everything in post-processing.
Yeah, so more about the finished result and like the theory to get there rather than the exact technique.
Yeah, knowing why you'd even want to get there or where you want to go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, the why is ultimately way more important, because you can figure out the how in lots of different ways. But if you don't even understanding is why, then you're just floundering around in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I had people ask me like about the new one, which by the way, I've had a lot of good feedback on it almost exclusively, but someone asked like, well, why didn't you do this to achieve this? And it's like, because it's more complicated, and because I just do it this way and you could do it that way, but it's not about how you do it. It's like, it's about why you're doing it and what you're achieving.
Well, you know, it's kind of a parallel that you're simplifying the tools for simplifications. So kind of
and I could have talked about that more, but well, I had a million ideas bouncing around in my head when I was making it, but I did think I kind of glossed over the fact that, yeah, it is pretty simple tools, simplifying your process so that you're not like bogged down with thinking about technical stuff, and you can think instead about what you're trying to do in the photo, trying to achieve. That's probably important, huh?
It's huge for me. Like I'm rare if I spend longer than 2 minutes on a photograph, like it's because I just sort of like that's not what I'm excited by. I want to get out there and be in the field, but I'm learning, and I think maybe if I had a look at yours, that might inspire me to take a little bit more time, Alex, and especially if the tools are a little bit more accessible and simple, and weren't sort of going to bog my brain down and technical hoo-ha.
I was reminded of this song when thinking of you only processing a photo for 2 minutes. Everything looks perfect from far away. How high are you?
That's why I like aerial photography, because I'm really from my subject matter. It all looks good.
I'm not saying that it's easy to come up with a good composition, but like as far as all the little things that show up in a tiny landscape, like it's just all smoothed out from thousands of feet up, right? Like, and you're just looking big picture.
I'll have to think about that, because when I think about it, you might be right. Like you can get away with less, I think, when it's such an intimate, close scene, because everything's
like
laid
just thinking
there.
about
there's
everything that could go wrong in this frame, right? Like every little thing stuck in the grass, or like every rock that sticks out. But like big picture, like obviously there's still distractions and you still have to compose, but like I feel like you have some, I mean, that just makes sense that you're not spending that long on it, because you're all on your composition, you know, like you're not leaning on the processing so much, because it just looks great. That's not to diminish
it's inherently
it
a simple landscape to begin with, so there's no need. As soon as you're up there, it's simplified to some degree. Yeah,
but that doesn't mean it's easy, because like, yeah, especially when you're reacting in real time. Like I thought it was hard enough with a drone, because I had to, do it before the battery ran out, which is what, half an hour. But you have far less time than that, right? You have
you're shooting at
seconds to react.
You're at 250 kilometers an hour. It's depending on the height you're at. It's a lot of time to compose, mate.
And it's often the most random aircraft you have too, Paul, especially in those sort of places. Some of the stories of the
sounds like a nightmare. I'm so bad at flying.
You play it down as being a bit dreamy and simple, but the reality is it's not for everyone. Not fixed wing in particular. It's like,
oh no, it's not. It's not simple to do it. I'm just saying you probably have to do less cloning, because things look good from up there.
I don't know if I've ever cloned anything in my life, mate, to be honest.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
No, I don't think I've warped anything either. I never stuck a bird in anything either. I that's pretty simple.
Oh, so you're a real photographer. You're actually relying on your composition, and you don't have to do it
Oh,
in
I don't know
Photoshop.
about real, but yeah, it's different folks, different strokes. But Alex, you're settled down now. I suppose that you're heading that direction. Is that spelling a change in lifestyle? Is that spelling a change in how you want to live? Is that spelling a change in what you're going to be doing for the next few years? What's sort of transforming for you, and where are you sort of heading towards?
Well, I just alluded to the fact that I'm terrible at flying because I'm horrified of it. But overcoming that hump, I should be able to go international, which I never have. My entire portfolio is the US,
Oh, that was
partly because I like to drive everywhere. And because you can drive everywhere in the US, but also um, like when we were on the road in a trailer, we went to Mexico once, and it was such a logistical nightmare to find a place to leave our house and like get to an airport. And like I just feel like now that I have a home base, I don't have to worry about leaving my home here, and I can travel more easily. So I think that's more likely to happen now. And also, with the trailer, it was kind of like you have to plan in advance because it was so big. Like find a place to park and like kind of plan your travel. And if we have a small setup, which we will, like a very small teardrop trailer and a more off-road capable truck, we can just head out on a whim. So I think that I'll probably be shooting more, ironically, even though I live at home now. Or at least I'll be shooting more as a choice and less because I just happen to be living somewhere at the time.
Yeah.
That was a thing a lot of the time, is like, well, I'm here, I might as well, but like I'd rather be at this other place. And now everything's a deliberate choice. I have to choose to go out on a trip like everyone else. So I think that I might like what I'm doing more.
Any bucket list places, Alex?
New Zealand, you guys
Oh
pretty
yeah.
close to that.
So
I just watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and like not the forest stuff, although we would want to see the Shire. My girlfriend's a huge fan. No, I think like the really desolate landscapes look really interesting there. Like Mordor and all that. Is that something? Am I just a dumb American, or could I find something like that there?
Oh no, if you do the circuit, I'm a Kiwi boy, so feel free to reach out and ask me anything you like if you're thinking of going there, mate. I was just
It's
back.
high on our list.
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
there in October. Very, very keen. I've only got photos from 2015 that are JPEGs that I lost the raws from when I was 2 years taking photos on a crappy camera, and yeah, they're not great. But yeah, I'm excited to be back there soon, and I'd love to see what you get there, Alex. It's a beautiful part of the world.
I would love to. I want somewhere that you can simplify the landscape, So like I'm not so interested in the rainforest, not just because of that actually, but because of the gigantic bugs and horrific creatures that seem to inhabit it. But
it is
yeah, like the wide
like
open
this big.
spaces that can be simplified. Like I want to feel inspired by the landscape. And I don't really feel that in forests most of the time. I like the vast places. So based on the Lord of the Rings, New Zealand looks pretty good to me. But that'd be the South Island, right? The North one is the forested one.
Yeah,
No, the way around actually.
Yeah.
5%
Am I
of
wrong?
native landmass of the North Island is original rainforest. It's mainly land cleared if you actually look at it from a very simplified man-made sort of point of view. But South Island is definitely wilder. It's grander. It's taller. It's more
I think
continuous.
That's the one we're looking at.
But the North Island, I feel because I'm from there, I'm a lot more on top of the beautiful kind of nuances and different sort of areas that are often a little bit more overlooked and less visited that you might enjoy. So different conversations to be had there, Alex. But yeah, feel free to reach out sometime, man, if you get into that planning stage.
Yeah. Well, there and I mean, Iceland should be on the top of everyone's list, but I feel like the popularity, not because other people are shooting them, but just because of the cost and potential crowding, that kind of turns me away. Although I think that the Highlands would be more of a goal than the outer ring, where you'd probably find most people.
Yeah, I literally spent last night and this morning on Lukey's guidebooks and a few other things. I'm heading there next month. I'm biting the bullet and trying to figure out how to do it on a shoestring, which is pretty hard with Iceland. And I spent a few hours
Yeah.
with David Thompson the other day, getting some great ideas too. He was a legend about it. So I'm gonna give
So
up. I've been
nice.
going for
Love
20
him.
years. I'm gonna give it a crack. I've got to at least give it a crack.
Yeah. And like the Atacama near Patagonia, more so than Patagonia itself. Like some of those exotic desert locations seem really cool to
Yeah,
me.
if anywhere if with that description you use, like for Mordor like scenes, I would say the Altiplano is probably the premier place in the world for that sort of thing. That real moonscape, like grand and just that place just excites me a lot, to be honest. But again, got to get acclimatized and
Yeah.
like the mountain air up there. She's pretty high.
Yeah. Alaska too, because I could actually drive there. It would just take 60 hours
Yeah.
going through Canada. Yeah.
Take it longer to drive
That's
from
on the
here.
list.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Well, I mean, it's all on the list, but maybe one per year at most. I'm friends with so many people that do like 20 workshops a year, and like they're all over the world, and like I just can't be at that pace. Even if I wasn't afraid of flying, it's just crazy to me. I might go to one in a year, but I feel like the US has enough that I could just the Southwest, like shoot here forever too. I mean, look at Guy Tall. He's in like one particular area of the Southwest, and he's going 20 something years, and he's got one of the most prolific portfolios ever.
True.
So you don't need to go. I think that's actually a big thing for me is you don't need to go far and wide, unless you really want to feel inspired by a new place. Like I also don't want to go to my local park so much. I'll go to Zion, but like, a park down the street from my house, because that might not inspire me enough. But I feel like there's a balance to be struck on like how far you have to go to feel like you're in nature and inspired to create, find something new.
Yeah, you're on the flip side now. Like I live on Kanani, which is this gorgeous kind of semi-alpine and broad environment. And because I live here, I hardly ever shoot it. And, and I try and get away to get the perspective on where I live and get re-inspired to shoot local. It's actually being on the show with people like Nick Monk, who we've had for years, and Nick who's and Luke who spent more time shooting it than I have, and I've been living here for 24 years. 24 years. It's like my folio of my backyard's like this big, and I can literally look out the window at a mountain peak that's covered in snow, which it was if you. It's like, oh man. So yeah. Welcome to flipping the script, Alex. Rather than like, oh, that's just out the window. I want to go somewhere else. You're coming back to us old plebs, and keep Tassie in
Well,
mind, man. Like
yeah,
Tassie's one of the most diverse landscapes in the world of anywhere that
that's
I've been.
behind Luke, right? That's
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well,
Tasmania. I know those plants anywhere.
yes, this is one of my favorite beaches that I was literally at yesterday. So yeah, it's so diverse, and all within a day's drive. There's nowhere in Tasmania you can't get to in a day, but you'll get everything from semi-desert to alpine lakes to huge peaks to forests to beaches,
Dunes. There's dunes.
white sand, dunes. It's
One's
just really,
simple
really
as well. This was Tassie.
even
This one's
New
Tassie.
Oh,
Zealand.
nice.
Yeah, New
They
Zealand's
got
quite like.
rocks there too.
They've got
Yeah.
rocks. It's a real
Rocks.
seller.
All right, I'm sold. We got some pebbles over there. It's not just a US thing.
Rocks.
Nice.
Yeah, but you're if I got to pick a single place in the world that I'm most drawn to, is actually where you're living, my friend. I've spent
It's a
quite a lot
good
of time in the
place.
States, and I've lived in the States on and off over the years. My mum's from Memphis, Tennessee, actually, so I'm a US citizen. And there's something about the Southwest that, yeah, it's sort of almost beyond words.
Yeah, you can't. I don't think there's anywhere like it, even though I haven't been all over the world. From everything I've seen in photos, I still have yet to see anything quite as diverse in terms of a desert landscape. Like the number of hidden secrets in the
Oh
Southwest
my
is
God.
absolutely insane. Like the number of canyons like this one that are just tucked away that no one will ever know about, or that very few people know about. And like you could spend your whole life exploring this stuff, and like it's the vastness, but combined with the fact that there are little things tucked away everywhere, like hidden in really unassuming places. That I think
And the scope for grand and intimate both in the same place is incredible.
yeah,
Not everywhere you can say that about. Some more lean much more to one.
yeah.
That
Like
I've,
this isn't all that far from yeah, like that's a big view, but then like you might find something like this down in there, or like a little canyon tucked away in some crack down there. It's crazy crazy.
Yeah, and then you've got the ease of access on top of that as well to get in anywhere. So I always say job for life. When you find places like that, you can quite easily just spend the rest of your life shooting that. But it's nice to
even if I
come back
become
to.
immobile, I can drive places. But there's also a lot of great backpacking to be done. But you have to carry your own water a lot of the time, or you have to go when it's not flash flood season if you want to have access to a river.
Yeah, backcountry is a little bit more work out there because it's a little bit more committed because of the extremeness of some of the conditions. But yeah, access wise, it's pretty unlimited, and there's so much space out there as well. You know that you can just spend so much time without really coming across many people once you get off the beaten track.
That's the thing for me, is the solitude and peace more so than like knowing that I've hiked X number of miles to get away from a road. Like, I don't care if there's a road there. I just care if there's other people around. And like when we go to exit steam there, when we go to like a state park, a local park, like on a weekend, when we make the mistake of accidentally doing that and there's like 500 people there, it's like, what the hell are we doing? Like, this is terrible, even though we like the place. But like, you could drive somewhere and without even hiking be in complete solitude in the Southwest. Like, no one else will be there for days. That's really all it is for me. I don't care how I got there, and it's nice to be able to drive, like I said, so that you can keep your energy for creative pursuits rather than hiking.
Alex, just on the flip side of that, like you obviously spend a lot of time shooting alone, as most wilderness photographers do, but you do have some pretty good friendships and people you shoot with on some occasion. Do you want to speak to that a little bit and how that's sort of been a part of your life the last?
Well, I mentioned Sarah Marino, her and her husband Ron. We shoot with them a lot, and actually David Kingham and Jennifer Renwick too. And they particularly Sarah and Ron have showed us so many places, just like because they're so motivated to always be discovering something new. And like go deep in Death Valley, for example. Like, they'll just be like, we're going to some canyon in the middle of nowhere that no one's ever heard of. Do you want to come with? I'm like, sure. I never would have gone there if they hadn't asked me to go. So I really like that other people can motivate me to do things that I would never think to do. But then once we're there, we like to spread out and kind of like focus on our own things. You know, we're not like usually standing there tripod to tripod, like standing next to each other. We kind of find our own stuff to be interested in. But yeah, I like being with people for that. And also, I mean, it's reassuring when you're really in a super remote place to have other people around, just for like safety reasons. And then yeah, I mean, I'm always with my girlfriend pretty much when we go out, Taylor, and she goes off and does her own thing, but she's there with me in the trail. Shoot with TJ when we do our workshops, and yeah, we just kind of do our own thing, but have someone nearby. I don't mind that, but I don't like to be talking or anything while I'm shooting. Like, I like to feel some solitude. I mean, it depends. Sometimes we both stand there and shoot something in the distance with our telephoto and shoot the shit. But yeah, I like to focus. Like, I like to get lost in what I'm doing. And I feel like my photos suffer whenever people are around and I'm talking to them instead of thinking about the photo or recognizing things around me.
So it's as much about getting you out to places and getting you out the door as it is.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's not for everyone, but for me, motivation is a big thing because I was super motivated in the start because I'd see like this new place I had to go explore and make a copy of someone's shot there. And now it's like I have to self-motivate. I can't really do that because of the things I'm shooting. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go copy that tree that someone shot. It's like I have to find a place that gives me a lot of opportunities along the lines that I'm interested in. And then I have to go. I have to choose to go on any particular day instead of choosing the comfort of home or whatever, which was an issue in the RV. Yeah.
Do you think that's more of an issue, Alex? Because Luke and I are full-time shooters, and Ben as well. And I think particularly maybe full-time single genre photographers, like we're becoming a rarer kind of commodity, I think, these days. And so many photographers are more part-time and have other aspects. And I wonder if there's a deeper, more challenging conversation about motivation when you're full-time as opposed to part-time.
I think it has to do with, well, yeah, I mean, it takes some of the magic out of it, right? When you do this for a job. Luckily, I don't have to shoot on assignment. So, like, when I go choose to shoot something, it's still totally of my own volition. Um, the only thing that's done like on a schedule is teaching. But just, yeah, if you allow any amount of like external pressure to get into it, it can be really difficult to stay true to yourself and to like still enjoy it. Like if I start thinking about what people will like or won't like, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Or like that I have to be somewhere that day to meet someone or meet some obligation. Like that's, then I can't focus on what I'm doing. I have to feel totally free of all that. But also being a full timer, like if you, and I'm not a full timer in the sense that I'm doing it all the time. I take long hiatuses, but if you have a pretty good portfolio going, like if you're happy with everything that you have, then like, yeah, I'd like to make more work, but also I feel happy enough with what I have that I don't feel that fire like I did in the beginning. Like, oh, I have to go make a new one. Like I have to go, like I just can just look at what I've already done, the rest of my laurels somewhat. So you have to fight that. At least I do. Like I feel like the bigger the portfolio gets, the less of a need there is to go out, and then it can only be like inspiration, sort of motivation that gets you out. So
Yeah, it's a fine line because sometimes having space from your work and coming back is helpful. Both the shooting side and the curation side. Like it's not always the best path to follow, just be hammering away along the same train line the whole time until you're at the end. That sometimes you need to take a break and jump off for a while.
oh yeah, you can't keep going. At least I can't, like nonstop. And when I do, I find that the work eventually starts to suffer, even though I'm like in the photography mindset, like we were talking about um, at the very start. Or maybe that was before we were recording, but yeah, being in the photography mindset, um, I feel like it only lasts so long, and like I only want to shoot if I feel inspired to, for the most part. I don't want to force it. And so even though I'll get in that mindset and be really like quick to compose something because I'm so practiced with it from the last month of shooting, like eventually I just burn out and I have to take a break. And being full time, I can't. I mean, these people running 20 tours a year. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah,
Alex, if you don't mind me asking how because this is an interesting line for all working photographers and full timers, is how you balance the commercial versus the artistic kind of balance of what you do, because they're slightly different value systems. What puts food on the table may or may not be, in a perfect world, it is aligned with your artistic aesthetic and that kind of thing. And you seem to have found a pretty good. You've done the work and the time, I guess, to be able to align those aspects of who you are and what you present and what you do day to day. But is that still a challenge for you? How to maintain a living from it, as well as sort of being true to your artistic aesthetic?
No, because I'm teaching. And that's really the key to it all, is that when you teach, if you find people that want to learn what you're doing, like want to learn your particular way of going about things, then you don't have to worry about like what the work, like whether it sells or not. You can be yourself as long as it's appealing to someone who wants to learn it. Whereas if I was trying to sell prints, I'd have to think about what people want on their walls, which that'd be terrible because they want like blue skies and flowers and shit on their walls, and like I don't think they want like desolate desert landscapes a lot of the time, maybe sometimes, but yeah, a lot of what goes on a wall and sells well is not that interesting to me, and a lot of it is. That's not to diminish it, but I just think it would be a lot harder if I had to try to do that. And teaching is like I can just be me, and like, yeah, you want to learn how to do what I do? Well, that's great because that enables me to do it for a living.
I heard a photographer in Australia once say, a well-known one, that after all the hard work and getting all your prints out there, at the end of the day, they're just going to pick one that matches their couch.
Yeah, and God, the amount of work that you put into something like creatively, that you think about something and then it's just like, oh, I like that it's blue. It's like, okay, I mean, that's cool. I like that it's blue too, but I am glad that I didn't have to think about that when I was making it, like.
Oh, exactly. Well, I think we'll have to start wrapping up, and before we do, we've got a new segment that we're going to start on this show, and that's called the burst mode, which is when we ask a few rapid fire questions of Alex just to get a bit more insight. Hopefully his brain's not too fried from all of the constant peppering of questions we already have. But yeah, just going to start the clock and going to fire away some questions here, Alex. All right.
Okay.
So do you have a favorite photography book?
Actually, it might be Treasured Lands by QT Long. It's like all of the US national parks. He's a little more of a documentary style, like not trying to get crazy with his creative interpretations. He's very true to the landscape, I should say. But the fact that he's gone so deep on every national park in the US, it's always inspiring when I pick it up. Is that too long of an answer for rapid fire?
Yeah, well, that's all good. That's all good. How about your favorite road trip food?
Oh shit.
Too revealing.
No, I mean, there's too much that's too terrible for me and too good at the same time. Other people always have dried mangoes, and I find that they're great, and I can never remember to buy them for myself.
That's a good tip. And then what's the most expensive bit of equipment that you've broken?
Well, I was in the Redwoods and it was wet, and I ran to meet my girlfriend. It was like 4 years ago, and slipped and fell, and my 24-105 and my breakthrough filter slammed into the ground and like snapped it off the mount of the camera. But I had insurance, so it was fine. I don't even care if maybe that's why I don't take care of my gear, is because I have insurance.
Well, that's what it's there for, isn't it?
I did leave my tripod before insurance. I left my tripod on top of my car once when I was packing up after a long hike, and then I just drove away with it on the car, and it fell off somewhere on the highway. Never found it.
Oops.
Yeah. And then do you have a favorite camera you've ever used?
A Canon R5 is pretty great. I'm on Fuji now because I have these issues with my arm, and I can't have a heavy 100-500 in my arm or in my hand all the time. It's just like hurts my elbow. So I switched to Fuji. I really like that too because of how light it is. But man, that R5 is pretty much a perfect camera, I think. I mean, there's some issues, but
I'm loving
mine. I was going to disagree. Yeah.
Well, there are all sorts of things I could complain about, but I can't think of better cameras necessarily for do it all. You want to get into that, Paul?
Not during rapid fire, but yeah.
Center column or no center column? What do you reckon?
Center column. Yeah, comp stomps won't be happy with me, but man, I hate the instability. There's some uses for it, but no.
How about when you're on driving, favorite music or podcasts?
I like on the way to a photography shoot, I don't even like lyrics, let alone speaking on a podcast. I like purely instrumental, almost electronic, like just atmospheric music that can let my mind wander into the landscape. I don't want to think about like someone's lost love or like hear about whatever they're talking about on a podcast. That's just distracting me from what I want to be thinking about on the way to shoot.
You're very intentional that way. That's awesome.
No, it's just, I mean, it's just, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I need a quiet mind to do it.
And last question. What's your favorite focal length if you could pick one?
One or a range?
Oh, maybe a range. Let's go with that.
Oh, 100-500.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
It's covering a few of them. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
That's the best thing about the R5, by the way. No one else has 100-500.
I don't need it. It's too freaking expensive, and I want one for my Iceland trip.
Yeah. They're worth it if you shoot 95% of your shots on it like I do. I hardly ever used my 24-105, but yeah, 200-600 is too long on the wide end, but I'll take that 600.
Yeah, 600's nice. I want to get that Sony one. That looks pretty good, but yeah.
My little Fuji.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. My little Fuji's 70-300, but it's cropped, so it's 105-450. That's pretty good. It's pretty close. It's so light.
Plus, I think you mentioned in the Discord you tried.
I could do everything. I could live with that. I could live with just that for the rest of my life. I'd be a little sad when I get into a forest that I couldn't get into the mid-range. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I won't get into gear because we'll talk another 15 minutes on it, so we'll leave it there. Cool. Yeah, we might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I might ask you. I might ask you another time, Alex, about that because I'm very interested in the
Yeah.
new R5. So yeah,
Sure.
Cool.
but yeah, that's been a really good chat, man. We've gone a lot of different directions, a lot of different places, and we've covered a lot of ground, and we've done it in a pretty organic, sort of fluid fashion. So really appreciate your time, Alex. And
Cool.
I think I tried a year or two ago, and then answered Ben in like 5 minutes and said yes. So I don't know if that's a testament to Ben or just the timing of your life.
No, it's the timing. It's because I just moved in somewhere with fast internet. For the last 3.5 years, it's been a real challenge to do anything like this because I have to know that I'll be in a place with good cell reception. And if I agree to do it, that means I have to force myself to be in a good place for that. Actually, when I judged NLPA, I had to drive. Like I was staying on a friend's property, which is kind of out in the country. I had to drive and sit in a parking lot for that 6-hour session.
Oh, damn.
And like use my laptop in the front seat of my truck. Oh, that was terrible. Yeah, it's a lot better to have an office now.
I've done a few shows in random car parks in really weird remote places off my phone during the years we were running this show too at times. But today was going to be one of those days, but I was like, oh no, I'm going to get myself home and do a solid for Alex here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks heaps for joining, Alex. Really appreciate having you on.
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really, really great to hear your insights, and yeah, really honored to chat to you.
I'm honored to be on. I scrolled through the guest list real quick. I'm like, oh yeah, I should say yes to this one.
Fantastic.
Like,
no,
you guys aren't just some little startup. You've had a lot of people on. How long you been doing it?
3 years.
Yeah, we started in COVID and we kind of just it's just never kept going ever since. Really, well, it's only ever going to be a few episodes, but it's just been amazing to link in and touch base with so many people around the world and so many different insights and ways people do things and share that with everybody else too. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I will have to listen to some. I'm rarely in the mood for podcasts, so I think people get offended if they hear that I haven't heard their episode of something or other, but actually I feel like that thing about the quiet mind is all the time. I always need to try to calm it down. My mind races, and so I don't even like listening to podcasts so much because it's just talking nonstop. I can't believe anyone's going to listen to me talk for this long. That's crazy.
Well, there'll be a few crazy people out there. Don't worry about that.
All right.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll leave it there for tonight. And we'll see everybody. Don't forget that Alex has got some tutorials and other products available on his website that you can check out. And we've had a really good look through his photos on there too. It's a really good source for inspiration, and he's got a great mailing list too that you can sign up on. And if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe as well, and we'll catch you again next time. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Alex.
Later. Good night.